Jinder Mahal's single WWE title reign was longer than all four of Edge's combined. Edge had 135 days as champion over 4 runs between 2006 and 2009, whereas the modern day Maharaja had a single 169-day reign in 2017. So guys, welcome back to the Luke Jackson Show. We're on episode 3, guys. Apologies for the delay with this week's episode. It's been a very, very busy time in the world of DKW. And there's still lots to come before the year rolls out. What can I say? Promoting 3 shows in a month is always a tricky one, but we're just about putting it off. This weekend, at time of recording anyway, we have our final shows of the year, followed by a weekend of fun, bit of mischief maybe, next weekend as we will have the DKW Awards, as well as my first ever concert of sorts for Founder Jackson's Karaoke Palooza, which will be a fun charity night featuring me singing karaoke songs, alongside a raffle and maybe a couple of games. We are going to be raising money for Little Havens Hospice, a charity that's dear to our hearts, and we've raised a lot of money for over the past 4 years with our wrestling events there. So please, guys, come along if you can. So I'm going to get right to it this week, and the big talking point for me is, of course, going to be WWE bringing us Survivor Series War Games on Saturday night. Now, I will be, or I may have already been, depending on when you watch this video, over on the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel discussing all things War Games. But I wanted to discuss an ongoing issue I've had with all of WWE events for a long time, and that is the matches. More specifically, how many matches we end up seeing on the PLEs nowadays. This year's Survivor Series War Games will feature War Games matches for both the men and the women, John Cena defending the IC Championship against Dirty Dom, and the Women's World title on the line as Stephanie Vaquer defends against Nikki Bella, and that's it. 4 matches on a PLE card. Now, of course, they may add something on the day or even on SmackDown, but the last few years have seen this event alongside the Rumble and the Chamber be reduced down to as little as 4 matches. And now 4 matches for me on a PLE that will undoubtedly have multiple adverts, 10-minute long entrances and video packages hyping every TV show, video game, podcast, toy line, and anything else that they do. That's not good. Now, I'm not saying that WWE needs to follow, or anyone really needs to follow the format that AEW do, where they have too many matches, but I do think we need to reach a middle ground here. They already removed the match from the pre-show, and are seemingly obsessed with there just being endless hours upon hours of talking both before and after the event. But they then have chopped these cards down to the point where it leads to multiple stories, wrestlers, and even entire divisions missing from the bigger shows. It feels almost like we're on wartime rations with these sometimes. The tag titles on the Raw brand have been on 1 PLE for the entire year, and that was WrestleMania, folks. The SmackDown and Women's Tag belts have fared a bit better, and they've managed 3 showings on the big shows. And granted, the SmackDown and Women's Tag Team Championships have been defended on television a lot, but it's still entire divisions that aren't being represented fairly on the bigger shows. I mean, surely the addition of Saturday Night's Main Event should have helped with this, as you should be able to space out the attractions evenly. But no, it just seems that the same people just get put onto both shows. Triple H has stated before that he is after quality and not quantity, and he's kind of curating these cards to make it so that these spots are deserved and earned, and that the matches get time to breathe around them. And sometimes this is true, but I often find that some matches quickly overstay their welcome. Like, did the mixed tag team match of Seth and Becky versus Punk and AJ at WrestlePalooza need to be 29 minutes long? 29 minutes long. I mean, I know the days of the strict 3-hour time limit are gone, but there's shorter Scorsese movies out there than some of these matches, I swear to God. In my book, a long match does not equate to quality, but more to laziness. WWE is the biggest wrestling company in existence, and they ever will be. And what, they can't afford to book more wrestlers on a big show? Remember, they're being paid billions to do these shows now. Back in the day, I felt like they really wanted your money for these events, as their job on television was to sell you on the fact that it was worth parting with your hard-earned money at the end of the month for the show. As a shock horror to the Netflix generation, PPV stood for pay-per-view, meaning you could watch it one time. And only usually when it was on. And sometimes you get some free replays, but often would have to pay for them. No recording, no streaming it later, it was often a one and done. But what I think this era made sure to do best was absolutely stack the cards with something for everyone. Multiple title matches, check. Biggest stars of the day, check. Stipulations, check. I mean, just taking a random Survivor Series from the archives, let's say 2003, right? You had 2 traditional Survivor Series tags, a Buried Alive match, an ambulance match, and 3 other matches, all on the same show. And it ran under 3 hours, and you got a good feel for what was going on in the company at the time. Hey, but you've just picked one from years ago. It's not relevant to today, I hear you cry. Well, look, let's take Survivor Series 2021, the last of the brand warfare ones before they brought in Boar Games to the main roster. This show had 7 matches, including one in the pre-show, and you had 2 Survivor Series tag team matches alongside multiple brand warfare matches. Now look, it's important to note that the quality of these 2 events is very different, with opinions of the 2021 event in particular being quite negative, but the point of offering variety still stands in my books. One could argue in the WWE Network era they could start to slip or make some cuts, because people went from paying $30 or $40 for one show a month to $10 for access to an entire video library of content as well as the pay-per-views. And although I live in privilege over here in the United Kingdom with the WWE Netflix deal, meaning that we are able to watch content for a cheaper overall price, in the States we know that it's not the case. They are currently in a very, very messy situation. We're needing multiple streaming services to watch WWE content. But most relevant to this conversation is the fact that the PLEs are all on the ESPN Plus service, which costs $30 just for that one show. So one could argue and say that America, at least, they're back to doing pay-per-views in many ways. And so I'd say for the ticket prices and the streaming prices, they deserve their cards to be a bit more stacked. I mean, how is any fan meant to care about the likes of Ray Phoenix or American Made and Natalia? They don't get presented on television, or PLE, or even the Saturday Night's main events, nowhere near enough. Back in the day, mid-card acts like Scotty 2 Hotty or Hulk or Holly, even Al Snow would get PLE matches. Triple H has got to learn in this era that not every match needs to be 20 bloody minutes long with a new member of the new faction debuting halfway through. You can just have these fun little 5-10 minute matches that are the end of a small matter. Filler matches have always been the case on shows, and they always will be. For years, people would call the women's match the piss break, or in the latter days of the cruiserweight division, that would also be said to them too. And all you do by reducing the matches is create new filler matches. But these are ones that are apparently very important. For example, at Boar Games this weekend, the Stephanie Vicaire and Nikki Bella match is the kind of de facto filler match. Boar Games are the main attraction, the raison d'etre as to why the people are in the venue in the first place. And John Cena is the only other match. So it leaves the girls to be the filler, sadly. And this feud, you say, is meant to be important, and it's Stephanie's first major one since winning the championship, and could be leading us to see the return of Brie Bella in what is, according to her anyway, Nikki Bella's final run in the company. Then that brings us to the pre-show match. This used to be a free-to-watch match back in the day on Sunday Night Heat, and more recently on the WWE Network and YouTube. And this was like sort of an appetizer, an hors d'oeuvre, to get people in the mood and to warm the crowd up for what's to come later on. It was also a good way to spotlight some lower card talent that weren't on the main card. I believe the last pre-show match they did was at one of the Saudi events, and nowadays they seem to favour hours of talking on the pre-show, as I've mentioned previously. So, what's the right amount of matches? I'd say 7. I'd say 7 for WWE right now. You need at least 2 world title matches, as they've got 4 world champions. 1 set up the tag belts to be defended, and 2 mid-card title matches. And then I'd say 2 non-title rivalries, or even number 1 contender matches. They were so fun back in the day. This would help give the show more variety and be more representative of what they are actually trying to present today. It also means there'll be more than just the same handful of wrestlers on the card. But hey, do let me know your thoughts on this, guys. Are you happy with a reduced amount of matches on the shows, or do you want more? Please also take this time to like, share and subscribe to this channel for more episodes, and so you know when the next one drops.
TV respects me. It laughs with me, not at me.
You stupid.
Right, so something else that has been declining, perhaps to a point of no return in my opinion, is television. Think long and hard. What even is TV anymore? I'm willing to bet that almost all of you consume most of your content via streaming. Even my mother in her 60s is watching the majority of her content via streaming services. She was in fact the reason and the inspiration for this segment, believe it or not. Every week on a Tuesday, she makes me buy her a TV paper. Now, the one she's after, one of these cheaper ones, I think it's called TV Choice, it's about 85p, and I've never understood why, particularly in recent times. We got rid of Sky, by the way, back in October, after months of rarely using the boxes for live television. We had the awful, and this isn't a review segment, but I'm going to say it was awful. We had the Sky Stream, right? And that meant that it didn't record stuff like Sky Plus used to back in the old days, but would go onto the box as a playlist that they called it. And then the box would act like a hub for us to watch stuff on apps such as Netflix, Prime or YouTube. But in the latter months, we found ourselves both really only using the apps. My mother has had an obsession with watching the news live. Lord knows why, nothing fun ever happens these days. But yeah, she'd watch the odd bit of live TV just to have something on the background. But all the drama she liked, she'd watch on catch up, and she absolutely loves a Netflix binge where she'll watch a whole series at once. And so it got me thinking that probably many younger people than both her and myself don't even bother to find out what's on TV. They just watch stuff that they fancy and when they fancy it, most likely on their phones. We're all guilty of just wanting to sit there and stare at a screen all day, whether it's phone, or iPad or whatever, and content is so easily accessible nowadays on any device. I mean, I remember sitting outside as a kid, about 10 of us gathered around a tiny portable television by the side of a Game Boy, watching the launch of Channel 5 in barely 80p. I mean, and nowadays, people are able to stream 4K perfectly to phones and tablets. So you no longer need to gather around a TV or a portable one to watch something at a set time or even set it to record anymore. I mean, who remembers having to type in numbers to record stuff back in the day? My God. Anyway, so that got me thinking about what is actually the state of television for those who, for whatever reason, don't have access to a streaming service. And I've got to say, it's bloody dire. And now look, I'm only basing this on Freeview because I think if you have Sky or Virgin, surely you'd have the internet because those things are usually, part of the parcel kind of thing. But back to Freeview, you can watch the same news cycle on repeat at different times of the day on almost every major channel. As news programmes are a huge chunk of the day, an absolutely huge chunk of the day. The two main broadcasters in the United Kingdom, the BBC and ITV, have a lengthy breakfast show for news, as well as full hours of bulletins in the afternoon and evening, along with several news-adjacent programmes like Newsnight and Peston. And don't forget, BBC have a news channel, so does Sky. Ugh. There's no children's strand anymore, like there once was back in the day. All that is now relegated to iPlayer and ITVX now. So kids, if they turn on the TV nowadays, they'd have to just watch repeats of sitcoms from 30 years ago. Yes, looking at you, Channel 4, still showing Everybody Loves Raymond, 20 years after it finished. Or show after show of home makeovers and celebrities doing things. Honestly, this is its own category. The rest, stuff like reality television, like Love Island, most of it now celebrities, and list shows. Honestly, Channel 5 are going to start listing dentists from the 1980s at this rate. And finally, repeats are still a huge part of regular broadcasting, which I find baffling. The major selling point to terrestrial television for years was the soaps, with episodes of both Coronation Street and EastEnders having been viewed by upwards of 20 million viewers at their peak. Even about a decade ago, they were being watched by 6 to 8 million viewers per week, but nowadays the ratings are around 3 million per episode. Now, it's worth noting that these shows now also premiere on streaming services like BBC iPlayer and ITVX. God, I hate ITVX. Another one that maybe needs its own section. They premiere on the morning of their broadcast. Now, look, I'm a massive Corrie fan, and I often get up before 7 a.m. to watch the newest episode of Corrie before starting my day. Corrie now even goes onto YouTube, so if you're a fan, you could watch it after you watch this episode. Sports too, like Wimbledon and coverage of the FA Cup and other football tournaments were also a big draw for terrestrial television. But even sport is now being shown on streaming services, with recent years seeing BBC iPlayer the home for a lot of content for the Olympics, as well as Prime and now Paramount Plus dipping their toes into streaming of football games. Sky themselves once had the monopoly on all sport. They also allow most of their sporting content to be viewable on a streaming service. In recent years, there have been some live TV successes, okay? So, such as the return of a show I'm a big fan of, that being Gladiators, or some of the big dramas that ITV have shown, such as Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. And the Christmas season is always a big pulling figure for live television, as the schedule get known to all well in advance. But outside these times, it just feels like TV is a box in the corner that you just watch other stuff on, and it exists for the sake of existing. I'd argue also a lot of channels should stop their 24-hour broadcasting now. Like, if I wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep, I'm not going to turn on the ITV night screen. I'm putting on YouTube or Netflix or something engaging on. I feel if they cut back the broadcasting hours and focus on improving the quality of stuff they put on during the day, they might stand a chance. Although maybe it is still doomed because of how good stuff on streaming looks. Streaming shows such as the Marvel TV series on Disney Plus or a lot of Apple TV's content regularly cost the same as a mid-budget movie per episode. Whereas stuff for terrestrial TV is still done on a lower budget, and so I think the streaming stuff is perceived as higher quality stuff that's worth paying for. Shows such as Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, It, Welcome to Derry, and countless others look and feel like movies with how big a scale the production is. And one can't help but think that makes watching a couple argue about how a place only has 6 bedrooms with 200k on a place in the sun seems rather boring by comparison.
He prefers to just be called Goldberg.
Tell him to say it to my face. Say it to my face, Bill Goldberg.
Now, finally this week, it's a topic I didn't really want to have a discuss, and I was flirting around it for a little bit, but I decided to include it. And that's kind of the ongoing situation with Bret Hart. Now, he has a reputation already for being outspoken and controversial, and lots of it I've agreed with, to be fair. But in recent years, he seems to be set out on tearing apart anyone, anything he just doesn't like when it comes to wrestling, particularly if your name's Bill Goldberg. But this past week, he went too far. He made allegations of a serious nature regarding that Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels were romantically involved with each other during the 1990s. It was a very long discussion, so I'll just read or show some of the highlights of it. So yeah, I've got to say, at this point, even I, as a die-hard Bret fan as a kid and forever a studier of his matches, I just think someone around him needs to tell him to shut the fuck up. He's at the point where he's starting to ruin and tarnish his legacy, and I think he has a lot to add to the business still. But instead he sits on his very, very well paid pedestal, just moan, whine and disparage the business that he says he loves. Now, it goes without saying that I do not believe a single word that he says in regards to these allegations. But it's damaging to someone to have that stuff out there. Both men have kids and families, and anything said online is there for life. I just think at this point as well, like, what's he trying to achieve? Facts do not change feelings, okay? And the facts are the screw job was nearly 30 years ago, and Goldberg ending his career was over 25 years ago. Nobody can change what has happened, but we can change what we do in the future. And I think, Bret, you need to change your outlook on what you're doing. Bret, you've left a fantastic legacy in your body of work that speaks for itself. Matches against the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mr. Perfect, Roddy Piper, Yokozuna, your brother Owen, and many, many others are untouchable in my opinion. You really were as good as you said you were, which is rare in wrestling nowadays. And everyone came out of a match or a feud with you the better worker and person for doing so. But it's becoming very attention-seeking, almost like the boy who cried wolf, the Bret who cried wolf, that could be the title for your new book, I guess, where now nobody believes anything you say has any value. It's only been done or said to create and spread hate, which as a man in your 60s isn't something that needs to be out there. So please, Bret, please stop moaning. Sincerely, the entire internet wrestling community. And look, that's it for another week, folks. So I'm going to hopefully make these regular with videos dropping on Tuesdays most weeks, but the odd week of doing Friday episodes when I get too busy. And apologies, guys, I still want to do some Christmas food bits, but I was trying to figure out kind of how to do it, and I couldn't make it work on a video for this week. But I do plan on bringing Christmas into this episode from next week in some format, so please comment if you have any suggestions how you'd like. Until then, make yourself scarce before I lock you in the sharpshooter.
Look at a step through! Sharpshooter! Can Natalya fight through the pain? Alexa Bliss in trouble. She taps out. Natalya wins the matchup.